economists get us to think about material prosperity, and we think about all the conditions, we can graph them, and life is getting better, but people are getting less happy. Well, I should say young people are getting less happy. So something is wrong, something is missing. And it's only really since it's sort of at the end of writing the book that I realized there was a thing I sort of had left out of the book a little bit. So the book is a tragedy in 2 acts. Act 1, we lose the play-based childhood. Act 2, we get the phone-based childhood. But what I realized near the end of the book is there's actually a 3rd act, which is the loss of community, and that comes first. Yep. It's why did we stop letting our kids out? Crime was plummeting, life was getting safer, but in the 90s and 2000s, we didn't know our neighbors anymore. All the stuff that Robert Putnam wrote about in Bowling Alone, the loss of social capital and trust. So that starts in the 60s and 70s. So we lose that. And so can we flourish if we don't have a sense of community, if we're not rooted in community? And I think the answer is no. And actually, let me just share, I know I'm talking too long here, but let me just share something we've discovered that really will relate here, which is this. When you graph out these hockey stick curves, rates of anxiety and depression, all of a sudden, 2012, they go shooting up. If you break it up by religious versus secular, so there's a question on this main survey that we all use of high school students, the Monitoring the Future study, and it's, religion is important to me and my family. Do you agree with it somewhat, strongly agree, disagree? And you just break it like, who says they agree, who says they disagree? And then you plot out the curves. What happens? The kids who say, I strongly agree, my family's religious, you hit 2012 and they go up a little. But you look at the kids who say no, you hit 2012 and they go up a lot. So we've known for a long time in positive psychology that the 2 big things that go with happiness are marriage and religion. Those are both about connection, being linked in. And so religion, we've known for a long time, religious people are a little happier than non-religious people. But that gap has grown a lot since 2012 for young people. And so I bring it back here because, as I said, I'm an atheist, but and I used to have some hostility to religion. When I was young, I thought I could have been a new atheist, except that I studied morality and I came to see, I believe we evolved to be religious, and that was an essential part of our gaining morality, culture, society, sacredness. We evolved to hold things sacred. That's it's one of our amazing abilities. It allows us to come together. So I became like, an atheist who actually has a lot of respect for religion, and that's why I get invited to things like, Veritas and all sorts of things. But whatever respect I developed for the importance of religion before 2012, when I wrote The Righteous Mind, is so much more pressing now because it's really the kids who aren't anchored in a binding community. They're the ones who got washed out to sea after 2012.
Softball question for Andy.
Sure.
Flourishing in spirituality, same question, but
well, I mean, this is where I am an apprentice of Jesus, and so I'm kind of bound to say it actually is the same thing as, humans got a person. Human beings have to do what it is to be a person. But I would call attention to 2 things in that, here's an interesting thought. When you mentioned marriage and religion, it's so I mentioned Jesus gives the expected answer, except he adds mind, which is really weird to just stick in an extra term in this thing that every observant Jew, including many here, I'm sure tonight, say every morning. He just adds the word, which is like Jesus. He does that stuff. And then the other thing is he's been asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he answers with 2. So the first one is the standard answer. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But then he says, and the second is like it, love your neighbor. And it strikes me, religion, in theistic religions at least, is about pursuing the love of God. And marriage is one very fundamental way of finding a neighbor who I now have the task of loving in a sustained way. And it's striking that it kind of matches those 2 axes. The other thing that is so interesting about the Shema, which is just the first Hebrew word of that text, is this word all. All your heart. What would it mean for me to live with allness of heart? That is, I am capable of the full range of emotion. I've laughed as hard as you can laugh, and I've cried as hard as you can cry. I sometimes say that's the measure of a truly trusting community. If you're in a truly trusting community, there has been a time when you all were just laughing like you'd never laughed before. Catherine and I, my wife Catherine's here, we have 2 friends who are like this. We were once in a restaurant where everyone got really mad because with this one couple that we're friends with, we were just laughing so hard at the absurdity of life. And with that same couple, we have wept at the pain and burden of life. That's allness of heart. Now, I get little glimpses of that. What would it look like to pursue that until that's my whole life, that range? Allness of soul. One of my very formative experiences was apprenticing in the Black church as a musician, the African-American gospel tradition of music. And I did not know what soul was, honestly. You might be able to guess. I'm not Black. I'm not from that tradition originally. But as I apprenticed in that Christian community and in that musical community, like, you learn some things. There's depth down there that you can make music with that many, really only modern cultures haven't accessed. All pre-modern cultures access it one way or another. And we could go on, right? And in the university context, we are pursuing allness of mind. I mean, that is the examined life. But what would it be like to pursue all of these and to reach allness and then have it all somehow orient itself toward love? So it's all in the surface of the other. That would be amazing, right? That would be being human. But the critical question we have to ask is any of this stuff we're adopting helping us do that? And I actually think it can help, but only if it's adopted very much not with its default settings. You got to change the default settings. And we have to collectively change the default settings.
Yeah.